5 years translating every game Nintendo threw at them gave the stampers all the time in the world to analyse the Japanese style of level and gameplay design. And now they could put it all into practice. Their company was renamed Rareware, and Donkey Kong Country launched in late November 1994, perhaps in a nod to the critics who'd questioned their sanity nearly 10 years before. It reached stores in the UK a day earlier than North America and 2 days earlier than Japan, and it sold like crazy everywhere. It was the first Donkey Kong game developed outside Japan without Shigeru Miyamoto's influence, reportedly to his annoyance. First to use pre-rendered 3D graphics on a console and, at over 9 million units, the second best-selling game in the SNES catalogue, right behind Miyamoto's own Super Mario World. Unusual for a platform of the time, two playable characters share the screen at once. Donkey Kong, a more even-tempered descendant of the original arcade monkey, and the faster, more agile buddy created specially for the game, Diddy Kong. The CGI graphics wowed everyone. While its reputation has faded somewhat in retrospect, Donkey Kong Country took several Game of the Year honours and put Rareware front and centre once again as a top development house. Sequels and spin-offs would file out for years to come. If Mario was officially the face of Nintendo, his old adversary was now the unofficial mascot of Rareware. While the Donkey Kong franchise was selling well, arcade gamers were busy pounding each other into goo in Killer Instinct, a fighting game running on Silicon Graphics CGI renders on Rare's own custom-built hardware. It was the Stampers' answer to Mortal Kombat, complete with no mercy fatality moves, and a lycanthropic saber wolf character, demonstrating they were still up for some of the hard stuff. When the N64 replaced the SNES, they drove the point home. Their opening Slavo was Blast Corps, a fairly merciful game about using construction equipment and giant robots to smash down sites and towns before a pair of wayward nuclear missiles on a transport truck hit them. But well before Blast Corps went into production, Rare engineers had spent years on what would become one of the cornerstone titles in video game history. After legal wrangling kept the series out of theatres for 6 years, Pierce Brosnan had made his long-delayed but much-lauded debut as James Bond in 1995's GoldenEye. Widely seen as a franchise reboot of sorts, Nintendo acquired the rights to make the video game tie-in. They promptly handed the property over to the Stampers, who weren't entirely sure how to approach it. Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang didn't exactly fit in with the N64's family-friendly image. After discussing the matter with project lead Martin Hollis, everyone agreed that if Nintendo didn't want a hyper-violent video game, they should have better familiarised themselves with how 007 typically conducted business. Development went forward on a first-person Bond rail shooter for the SNES, then transferred to the N64 when the hardware came along. With the N64's increased capabilities in play, Rare took Bond off the rails and made it a fully free-roaming 3D shooter. The largely inexperienced design team, led by Hollis and David Doak, still put the traditionally insane number of hours Rare work required, but now that the company wasn't releasing 15 titles a year, all that effort went into one game. They started throwing in all kinds of tweaks into their little movie tie-in. Things nobody else had ever tried. Different areas of the body would take different levels of damage, with headshots being instantly fatal. Sniper rifles could be zoomed in on targets. Stealth elements came in, from using suppressed weaponry to sneaking past unsuspecting guards to removing security cameras. Rather than go by the Doom model of kill everything, exit room, missions and objectives vary by level. And then there is the multiplayer. It came in at the last minute, an afterthought, but it just so happens to rock, just as much as the rest of the game. It shouldn't have worked at all. A console FPS, a movie tie-in made 3 years after the movie, cobbled together over 2.5 years by a team of first-timers at a company that many felt wasted years producing cheap movie tie-ins. Everything spelled disaster. GoldenEye 007 was, however, a revelation and a revolution. It became the non-PC first-person shooter, the only one that made sense and played spectacularly. 1 in 4 N64 users owned it. Rare was named Best UK Developer by BAFTA, and GoldenEye 007 took Console Action Game of the Year, Console Game of the Year, Interactive Title of the Year, and Outstanding Achievement in Software Engineering at the 1988 Interactive Achievement Awards. Its reputation for top quality gaming now firmly re-established, Rareware turned back to platforming for Dream, the story of a boy named Edison taking on a pirate captain Blackeye with a wooden sword and help from a man rabbit rather stupid dog, and a fairly confused bear. The gameplay was designed around the 3D platforming standard set down by Miyamoto in Mario 64, with a few rare touches and refinements thrown in, just for good measure. By the time it was shown at E3 1997, Edison was out, and Banjo the Bear took over as lead, along with his partner, Kazooie the Bird. Nintendo hyped it as the Donkey Kong Country for the N64, and put together a Taco Bell merchandising tie-in for it. Unfortunately, delays pushed it out past the target holiday season. Fortunately, Rare were covered by releasing Diddy Kong Racing, capitalising on their character from Donkey Kong Country, and featuring Banjo as a playable racer. Diddy Kong Racing took the console racing trophy at the 1999 Interactive Achievement Awards. Banjo-Kazooie was released later that year, and was nominated for Game of the Year at the 1999 Interactive Achievement Awards. It won in the Console Action Adventure and Art Direction categories. Rare had another new franchise and a new mascot. Publicly, Rare was on a roll. Behind the scenes, however, employee turnover bordered on disastrous. In the few interviews they granted, Tim and Chris Stamper came across as quiet, unassuming Englishmen. But the pace they maintained and the demands they set could grate at closer range. By the N64 years, their tiny company had grown from the low teens to several hundred, but the Stampers kept their hands firmly in every project, and that management style didn't sit well with everyone. The first public defection happened in 1997 when a group of employees marched out en masse to form Eighth Wonder, a studio dedicated to developing for Sony. Well into a 3-year production cycle for a successor to GoldenEye 007, Hollis and Doak decided they'd had their fill as well, taking much of their production teams with them. On top of that, Rare produced Donkey Kong 64 and third-person shooter Jet Force Gemini in 1999 to decent reviews, which looked dismal compared to their previous 3 releases. It seemed they'd set the bar too high, and good simply wasn't good enough anymore.